This is the start of the apocalypse, and no one is talking about it. This should be all over the news. People need to know. But I've checked, and since those useless fucks aren't saying a damn thing about it, I guess I'll have to tell you here. First things first, it's too late for all of us. Don't think you can do anything to change the way things are now, or the way they are going to be. After you read this, just board up your windows, grab some weapons, and ration your food. Do not go outside. Do not leave your house unless you absolutely need to. I don't know how far this thing has spread. All I know is that the shit has hit the fan here so fast. There's no way that anyone will get it under control before it spreads throughout the country. Right now, I'm in my 5th floor studio apartment. I didn't have time to board up my windows, and it's too late for that now. Loud noises attract them. I'm lucky to be so high off the ground. They can't bust through the glass anyway. I put some thick blankets up, though, so I don't have to see them. Hearing them is enough torture. The first murder happened at a small park down the street from me. A homeless man mauled a woman to death in broad daylight with his bare hands and teeth. Bashed her head in, ate her face and throat, ripped out her insides and munched on those too. We all thought it was just another nutcase on bath salts. He was shot down, and we thought that was the end of it. But in the following days, it happened again, and again, and again, until the whole town was in a panic. So many people were dead. We wished they would have stayed that way. For 2 weeks, I laid low. I stayed in my apartment. I listened to the groaning and growling and screaming from the streets below me. I cried. I prayed. Things got quieter, eventually. The screams only came occasionally, when some poor soul tried to make a run for it and got caught. And while the growling still happened often, it wasn't constant and relentless like before. Just a few of the infected passing by. Eventually, I ran out of food. So I did what I had to do to survive. I put on my big girl pants, grabbed my backpack and metal baseball bat, and ventured out into the open to raid the closest store I could find. My mother always told me to hope for the best, but prepare for the worst, and that is exactly what I did. I knew full well that once I left, there was a good chance I wouldn't make it back. But I had a choice to make: stay in my apartment, starve, and die for sure, or leave my apartment, prepare to kick ass, and maybe die. Obviously, I chose the latter. I took a deep breath, tightened the straps of my backpack. I raised my bat and clutched it tight, my knuckles turning white. I opened my door and stepped outside into the hallway. There was nothing, just silence. I think it was scarier than what I expected. An infected person running toward me at full speed. It made me realize how utterly alone I was. All of my neighbors, gone. Just me in a small town, and a bunch of monsters outside, waiting to tear me to shreds. I hadn't, and still haven't, been in touch with my mother or the few friends I had in weeks, despite my attempts at reaching out to them. I've assumed the worst. There was no time to mourn. I crept towards the stairwell and opened the door, careful not to let it slam behind me. I paused, listening for the noise of the dead. I heard no grunting, no groaning, no growling. None of the animalistic sounds they made non-stop when they were around. And so I ventured down the stairs. I made it to the exit without incident. Step 1 of my mission was complete. I cracked open the door and peered outside. I saw nothing but a dumpster and a brick wall behind it. Another side of the building. I slipped out the door. I wasn't careful enough, and it slammed behind me with a loud bang. I immediately hauled ass down the road. I heard a symphony of deafening roars somewhere far behind me. They were growing louder, and I realized what had happened. I had attracted the horde. I was too far away to turn back. I'd just be running straight toward them if I did that. I ducked into an alley and hid behind a dumpster. Fuck, fuck, fuck! I listened to them howl as they ran by. One thing I know about these things is they have 2 feelings. The first one is aggression. The second is hunger. Their hunger is insatiable. When things started getting out of control, I'd sometimes watch in horror from my window as they tore people apart, ripping out their insides and feasting on them as the victims screamed and cried hopelessly until they eventually turned, becoming the very thing that slaughtered them. The horde was huge. There had to be at least 30 of them. I had no idea how many of them were still in my town. I knew they were there, but I guess I just thought most of them moved on to the other, more populated places after they wiped out mine. I stayed behind that dumpster until one of them staggered down the alleyway towards me, fortunately unnoticed by the other beasts. That was the first time I ran into one face to face. When she noticed me, she let out a low snarl and cocked her head, revealing the gory mess that was her neck. She limped a bit closer. Her leg was snapped in half, dragging behind her. Her arms hung limply at her sides. I noticed that her eyes were light blue, with a weird, milky film over them. Her hair was thin and white, her pale face covered in old, dry blood. The second she reached out for me, I bashed her over the head with my bat as hard as I could before running down the other side of the alley. I stopped a few feet before I reached the road to make sure the coast was clear. It wasn't. There had to be at least 15 of them wandering around on that side. I was stuck. I turned around, my heart racing in fear. Bloody Neck was crumpled on the ground where I'd hit her. I walked back over to take a look. Brains and blood seeped out of her skull as she lay there, completely still. Cautiously, I poked her in the side with my bat and got no reaction. Then did it again to be sure. I'd done it. I'd killed my first dead person. I waited a few more hours for the streets to clear, and finally made it back home, wondering where it was they hide when they're not out in the open. I'm still out of food. Mission failed. But at least I'm alive. And at least they didn't follow me home. I'll try again tomorrow. My advice to you? Prepare for the worst, hope for the best, and get him in the head. Journal entry. Day 1. It's surreal to be writing this. Pen scratching against a paper in the dim glow of a flickering candle. The world outside my window is no longer the one I know. The once familiar sounds of a bustling city have been replaced by an eerie silence, punctuated only by the distant moans of the undead. The outbreak began like a whisper, a murmur of fear that crept through the cracks of society. News reports spoke of a mysterious virus, spreading like wildfire and reanimating the dead. I remember dismissing it as another sensationalized headline, never fathoming that it would soon knock on my doorstep. Today marks the collapse of everything we once took for granted. The streets, once alive with the pulse of civilization, now lie deserted, abandoned. I've lost count of the days. Time has become an abstract concept, a luxury overshadowed by the relentless pursuit of survival. Morning light reveals the city's decay in stark detail. The air is thick with an acrid stench, a putrid cocktail of death and despair. I ventured outside cautiously, my footsteps echoing into the emptiness. The world around me is a mosaic of shattered lives, fragments of a reality forever broken. The groans of the undead linger in the air like a haunting melody. They shuffle aimlessly, their vacant eyes fixed on some distant, insatiable hunger. I've seen neighbors, friends, and strangers succumb to this grotesque fate, their humanity stripped away, leaving only a grotesque parody of life. My apartment has become a fortress, barricaded against the encroaching tide. The windows are boarded up, and the door reinforced with whatever makeshift materials I could scrounge together. Each night, I huddle in the darkness, listening to the distant wails of the undead, a cacophony that echoes the collective tragedy of the world. Resources are dwindling, and the city's water supply is tainted. A sip from the last bottle of water tasted like desperation. I ration my food, clinging to the hope that this nightmare will end, and some semblance of order will be restored. Communication is a distant memory. The once vibrant signals of the digital world are silent, and my phone, now a relic of a bygone era, remains an inert slab of plastic and metal. I'm left to wonder if anyone else is there still fighting, still holding on to hope. In this bleak landscape, I am both survivor and witness, chronicling the demise of a world that once thrived. Each scratch of this pen is a testament to my defiance, a declaration that I refuse to become another forgotten casualty. As I prepare for another night, I can't shake the feeling that the worst is yet to come. The city, once a tapestry of dreams and aspirations, is now a canvas painted with the somber hues of an apocalyptic nightmare. This journal, my only companion, is a lifeline to sanity in a world that has lost its way. Journal entry, Day 5. The days have blurred together in a continuous stream of survival, each one marked by the rising and setting of the sun. A relentless march of time against a backdrop of decay. The barricades have held, but the moans of the undead linger like a haunting lullaby, a constant reminder that the world outside is no longer ours. Food supplies are dwindling faster than anticipated. The canned goods that once seemed abundant now mock me from the nearly empty pantry. Hunger gnaws at my stomach, a relentless companion that refuses to be ignored. I ventured out today, armed with a makeshift weapon, to scavenge for anything that could sustain me a little longer. The streets were a graveyard of abandoned cars and shattered glass, a testament to the chaos that unfolded here. I moved cautiously, my eyes darting between shadows, hyper-aware of every creak and groan around me. The city, once a thriving metropolis, now felt like a ghost town haunted by the echoes of its own demise. I found a convenience store, its windows shattered and its shelves picked clean by desperate hands. The air inside was stale, tinged with the scent of spoiled goods and rotting flesh. I scavenged what I could. A few dusty cans of beans, a bottle of water with an expiration date long past. It's a meager haul, but survival has become a game of inches. As I make my way back, a distant scream pierced the silence. My heart pounded as I quickened my pace, fearing the worst. The barricades loomed on the horizon, like a beacon of false safety. The scream intensified, accompanied by guttural growls that sent shivers down my spine. Reaching my refuge, I gasped for air, my hands trembling as I secured the barricades behind me. The scream had faded into the symphony of the undead, a chorus of hunger and desperation that surrounded me like a vice. I huddled in the darkness, my meager supplies a cruel reminder of the fragility of life in this world. Loneliness is a heavy burden. The silence within these walls amplifies the absence of human connection. I find myself talking to the walls, to the empty air, desperate for a shred of normalcy. The memories of laughter, shared meals, and the warmth of human touch feel like fragments of a dream slipping through my fingers. Night falls, and I'm left with my thoughts. The flickering candle casting dancing shadows on the walls. Sleep is elusive, haunted by nightmares that bleed into waking hours. The line between reality and dreams blurs, and I often wake with a start, disoriented and afraid. In this journal, my confidant in solitude, I grapple with the uncertainty of tomorrow. The world beyond these walls is both a threat and an enigma, and the pages of this journal bear witness to my struggle for survival and sanity. I cling to that hope. Somewhere in this desolate landscape, others are writing their own stories of defiance against the encroaching darkness. Journal entry, Day 12. The days continue to meld into an indistinguishable continuum of survival. The walls of my makeshift fortress seem to close in on me, a constant reminder of the fragile barrier between safety and the hordes outside. The once spacious apartment feels suffocating, and the relentless moans of the undead echo in my ears even in the moments of silence. Hunger has become a constant companion, gnawing at my insides. The meager supplies I scavenge are now a distant memory, and each meal is a careful rationing of the little that remains. Desperation lingers like a bitter taste, and I find myself contemplating the unthinkable, venturing further into the city in search of sustenance. The occasional shuffle of undead footsteps punctuates the silence, and I move the cautious steps of a scavenger navigating a graveyard. The city has become a macabre theater, and the undead, the actors in a play of unending tragedy. As I scavenged through the remnants of abandoned stores, a distant noise caught my attention. It was a feeble cry for help, a desperate plea that cut through the monotony of the undead moans. My instincts wavered between self-preservation and a flicker of humanity long suppressed. Against the warnings echoed in my mind, I followed the sound through the labyrinth of the streets. The cries led me to an alley, where a figure huddled against a dumpster, surrounded by a trio of hungry undead. My heart raced as I weighed the risks, the moral dilemma of saving a life in a world that seemed to have lost all sense of morality. In a desperate surge of adrenaline, I lunged at the nearest undead, my makeshift weapon sticking with ferocity born of survival. The others turned toward me, their milky eyes fixed on the new intruder. The cries for help grew louder, and the figure in the corner looked up, eyes wide with a mix of terror and hope. The skirmish was brutal, a dance of life and death in the narrow confines of the alley. My weapon, stained with the putrid blood of the undead, became an extension of my will to survive. The figure, a young woman with disheveled hair and tear-streaked cheeks, scrambled to her feet as the last undead collapsed to the ground. Her name is Emily. She has been part of a group trying to escape the city when they were ambushed. She's the sole survivor, and her eyes carry the weight of witnessing the demise of those she once called friends. We share a silent understanding, a bond forged in the crucible of survival. Against my initial reservations, I invited her back to my fortress. The walls that had felt suffocating now seemed like a heaven, a sanctuary against the relentless horrors outside. We spoke little, the unspoken understanding of predicament filling the air. As night falls, I find myself cautiously hopeful. Emily's presence is a reminder that, in the midst of this nightmare, moments of connection still exist. The pages of this journal, once a solitary testament to my survival, may now bear witness to a shared struggle for a semblance of normalcy in this fractured world. I write these words by candlelight, the dim glow casting shadows on the walls. The future is uncertain, and the dangers that lurk beyond the barricades remain ever present. But for now, in the quiet moments between the moans of the undead, I allow myself a fleeting moment of solace, a fragile ember of hope in the encroaching darkness. Journal entry, Day 20. The passage of time is both a relentless march and a fleeting whisper in this world that refuses to adhere to the familiar cadence of the past. Emily and I have settled into a rhythm of survival within the confines of this fortress. The walls, once a symbol of isolation, now stand as a bulwark against the relentless onslaught of the undead. Our days are spent in a delicate dance of scavenging for supplies, rationing what little sustenance we can find, and reinforcing the barricades that separate us from the nightmarish reality outside. The journal, once my solitary confidant, now bears witness to the shared struggle for survival in this dystopian landscape. Emily and I have formed a bond of necessity. She's become a silent companion in this silent world, a partner in this delicate ballet of avoiding the undead and securing the means to stay alive. Yet, in the quiet moments, when the flickering candlelight casts shadows on the wall, I can't escape the nagging question. How long can this fragile sanctuary endure? The city is a labyrinth of danger, its street fraught with the unpredictable menace of the undead. Venturing beyond our refuge feels like stepping onto a tightrope suspended above a chasm of uncertainty, and yet the dwindling supplies and the gnawing hunger force us to consider the unthinkable. A journey into the heart of the city in search of sustenance. Our decision is hesitant but unanimous. The next morning, armed with makeshift weapons and a dwindling courage, we step into the abyss beyond the barricades. The streets are a graveyard of abandoned dreams, the buildings towering above like silent sentinels of a world that once thrived. The echoes of footsteps are swallowed by the oppressive silence, broken only by the distant moans of the undead. We are cautiously scanning every corner for signs of danger. This city is a desolate canvas, painted with the remnants of humanity's struggle for survival. As we navigate the eerily quiet streets, a new realization settles in. We are not alone. Other survivors, like us, navigate the shadows, their eyes carrying the same mixture of fear and determination. The unspoken understanding between us is a fragile thread that binds the remnants of humanity in this desolate landscape. We encounter a group holed up in an abandoned store, their weary eyes assessing us with a mix of suspicion and hope. Conversations are brief, the shared language of survival transcending the need for unnecessary words. Information is exchanged. Rumors of safe zones on the outskirts. Whispers of a network of survivors trying to rebuild. The encounter leaves me with conflicting emotions. A renewed hope in the resilience of humanity, but also a realization that trust is a currency in short supply. The lines between ally and adversary blur in this fractured world, and every stranger is a potential danger. As we return to our fortress, the weight and uncertainty hangs heavy in the air. The journey into the city has yielded supplies, but it has also cast a shadow of doubt on the fragile stability we've managed to carve out. The barricades, once a symbol of safety, now seem like feeble defenses against the relentless tide outside. The flickering candlelight dances on the page of this journal, capturing the essence of our shared struggle. The future remains uncertain, and their survival as fragile haven hinges on the choices we make in ever-shifting landscape of this dystopian reality. Journal entry, Day 30. Emily and I have become reluctant architects of a new existence, our survival dependent on the delicate balance between caution and desperation. The encounters with other survivors have become a double-edged sword. We forge alliances with some, sharing resources and strategies for navigating the city's perilous terrain. Yet the specter of betrayal lingers, a reminder that this world, trust is a commodity more precious than any ration of food. Our journal, a testament to the passage of time and the trials faced, is filled with the ink of our fears and hopes. Its pages have become a silent witness to the evolving narrative of our survival. But as the ink stains the paper, so do the stains of the world outside mark our souls. The city holds secrets, some whispered in hushed tones by fellow survivors, others hidden in the shadows of dilapidated buildings. There are rumors of a faction, a group that has harnessed the chaos for their own game. The Umbra, they're called, a name that sends shivers down our spines. Their motives remain a mystery, but their presence is a looming threat that taints the fragile hope we cling to. Emily and I embark on occasional forays beyond our fortress, navigating the city's desolation with a wariness that borders on paranoia. The encounters with the undead have become routine, our makeshift weapons striking with mechanical precision born of necessity. The whispers of the Umbra, however, linger in the air like a toxic fog, raising the stakes of our survival. As we navigate the ruins of a once grand library, a relic of knowledge now reduced to dusty remnants, we stumble upon a cache of journals. Their pages, filled with the handwritten accounts of those who came before us, echo with the same themes of loss, survival, and the relentless pursuit of hope. It's a sobering reminder that our story is just one chapter in a large saga of humanity's struggle against the encroaching darkness. The whisper of the Umbra grow louder, and we are forced to make choices that blur the lines between morality and survival. Every alliance is a gamble, every decision a tightrope walk between self-preservation and the preservation of what makes us human. The flickering candlelight casts shadows on the walls of our fortress, and the journal lies open before me. The ink stains tell a story of resilience, of a determination that hold on to fragments of normalcy in a world gone mad. But as the days press on, the ink may all tell a tale of compromise, a sacrifice made in the name of survival. In this ever-changing landscape, where the undead roam and the shadows of the Umbra loom, we press forward. The future remains a hazy mirage, and the pages of this journal may one day tell a story of redemption or despair. Until then, we cling to the ink-stained hope that, in the face of the eclipsed dawn, the human spirit will endure. My name is Paul, and I don't know how else to get this information out without being sent to a padded cell. So I figured I'd come here, try to get my story out, so that maybe your world won't make the same mistake as mine. Honestly, this place reminds me a lot of my home from when I was a kid. It hasn't been this nice in a long time, though. I couldn't remember the last time I had slept peacefully until coming to your world. I'm not sure how I got here, but I'm here now, and I'm glad I'm here. Part of me wonders if I died and this is somehow what heaven or hell looks like. That being said, I'm here now, and I never want to go back to that place. I am worried that this place could make a similar mistake, so hopefully, by getting this information out, we can avert that disaster. I'll start with what I do know. I'm a human just like you, and I'm also from a place called Earth. It resembles this place almost exactly with maybe a few names changed here and there, but for the most part, this place feels pretty much like the place I remember as a kid. I remember growing up in a small town in northern New York. I went to school, played with my friends, and lived what I assumed was an average life. That was until I turned 18. On my 18th birthday, there was something big in the news that happened. There was some kind of terrorist attack. In this case, it wasn't an explosion. but the release of some kind of chemical that killed everyone that was in a 1-mile radius almost instantly. I never did find out who had done the attack. I guess it doesn't matter now, but I still wish I would have found out. The attack took place in Times Square in New York City and was absolutely devastating. As you know, Times Square is an extremely popular tourist destination. I'm not sure how many people were there that were killed, but the cleanup of all the dead would have taken weeks if they have had a chance to do it. Before any humanitarian aid was able to be given, the dead started to rise. These weren't walkers either. They could do almost as much as a human could do when they got back up. There must have been 500,000 dead that got up all at the same time and devoured New York City in a matter of a few days. All I could do was watch in horror as the news pushed out broadcasts of the carnage 24/7. People in the city didn't have time to react, and before they realized that these people weren't really people anymore, it was too late. I did what any normal person would do during this time, and rushed to the supermarket to get as many supplies as my broke 18-year-old self could buy. As you would expect, the shopping center was almost wiped out immediately. People were tearing each other apart to get just one last can of soup or case of water. There were a lot of casualties the first few days, and the dead haven't even made it to us yet. We assumed the military would get this under control before it ever made its way 6 hours north of the city. The problem we didn't realize at the time was that this sickness, or whatever it was, could be spread. Anytime someone was bitten or scratched by one of those things, they would last maybe 12 to 24 hours and would die. Within an hour of death, they would get back up and start killing and consuming any living thing they could get their hands on. Our one saving grace was that animals didn't seem to be susceptible to the sickness. People were fleeing New York City and were heading to smaller rural areas to hide. Some of these people were sick, and within a few hours of making it up north, they had died and started spreading the sickness. That's how it was able to spread so quickly. That's why everything fell apart so fast. My first experience with one of those things was maybe a day or two after the chemical was released in New York City. I was held up in my house watching the news and trying to keep up with what was happening. Officials told us to shelter in place and limit the amount of time we were out of the house. They recommended we barricade doors and windows to avoid the infected. Before I had a chance to do any of this, one of them was slamming on my front door. It didn't take long for it to figure out that there was a window on my front porch, and it smashed right through it. I only had seconds to get to my kitchen and grab the biggest knife I could find. It came staggering through the window, glass sticking to its skin. It didn't seem to even notice that it was bleeding and covered with glass. It was a man, maybe early 30s. It didn't notice me at first, but when it did, it came at me at a dead sprint. I tensed up and prepared for the impact. I swung the knife forward toward its head and was able to stab it directly in the eye. It slammed me to the ground and growled at me, trying to bite me in the neck. With my hand still on the handle of the knife, I pushed with all my might and felt the knife sink deeper into its skull. The man went limp, and I pushed him off, trying to pull myself together. I didn't have much more time to pull myself together before I realized more of them were outside. I ran upstairs, grabbed my rifle, and prepared a go bag. There was no way I was going to make it staying in this house. It was too easy for them to get inside. I grabbed the knife from the man on the floor and grabbed my keys. I didn't know where I was going to go, so I just started driving and hoped that I would find what I needed. We had a nearby military base, but I didn't think that would be a great idea for me to go with how many people would be heading that way, healthy or infected. I headed east toward the Adirondacks with the hope that it wouldn't be as populated. I never did manage to make it that far. My car ended up breaking down halfway there after I accidentally hit one of them. I ended up in a small town that I could tell had already been ravaged by them. I didn't see any of them around, so I went to the closest house that looked the easiest to fortify. That's actually where I ended up spending the next 15 years in. I saw my fair share of them from time to time as the years went by. I saw even more any time I had to go to the neighboring towns to find supplies. Luckily, they didn't seem interested in anything other than humans, so I was able to hunt and fish to feed myself. I built a decent-sized garden that gave me fresh veggies. I was very lucky. I had seen on the news, while they were still airing it, that many places were teeming with these things. They were everywhere, and no one seemed safe. After about 4 days, I stopped seeing the news. I'm not sure if this became a global problem, but I never saw aid come from other countries. So they either left us here to our own devices, or the infection had spread outside the borders and the whole world had gone to hell. You may be asking yourself, how did I get here then? I've been trying to figure that out myself. I don't know if this is an alternate dimension, or I just died and have no memory of it. Either way, I'm happy. I'm here, and I have no want or need to go back to that place. Please be safe out there. There was a zombie outbreak out west in the late 1800s. I'm here to tell you all about it. Part 1. I got an urban legend to tell y'all. It's an old ghost story my family has been passing down for generations. Now, I just called it an urban legend, but it's totally a true story. Nothing can be verified indefinitely. That's what makes it a legend. But there are some clues that were left that indicate this actually happened, which I'll mention at the end. Here we go. The story starts off in Nevada, and that's all I'm going to say about the location. We don't exactly know what year, but it was sometime during the 1880s, maybe late 70s. Anyway, the locale of this little tale is a small valley town. I wouldn't say more than 20 to 25 people lived there at the time. I have not been able to verify this town's existence, but honestly, I can't imagine how many Lost Valley towns there are way out west in the early days. But according to legend, this town was buried on purpose. It starts on the night of a meteor shower. Now back then, they didn't really know what they were, since they didn't have the news or the Weather Channel. But apparently, it was going on long enough that two guys, Smokey and Billy, went up on the roof of the general store to keep watching it after everyone else had gotten bored. They're up there wondering how far away those shooting stars are, when they see one that was apparently so close they could visibly see it in the sky above them. As in, they can make out its outline and see the tail and everything. In fact, one flew by so close that they could actually feel the rush of wind as it flew by. They even witnessed it crash in the mountains with a huge explosion. It must have been a very small meteorite, since it didn't cause any massive shock waves or leave any lasting impact that the general populace knows about anyway. The explosive boom brought the whole town outside. It was your typical western town. One main road with various buildings, etc., and everyone out in the road with their torches talking about what happened, who saw it, is God Almighty himself down from the heaven, etc. Smokey and Billy tell everyone what they saw and that one of the shooting stars might have crashed or otherwise landed in the nearby mountains. It looked like it had landed on a well-known to them mountain lake up near a small peak. Now these mountains are miles away. It would take about a half a day on horseback to get to the base of these mountains. But that's exactly what they decide they are doing. Smokey and Billy are joined by their friends, Jack and Angley, and the sheriff was going too. He was a real hard-nosed sheriff by how the story's been told. No nonsense, straight as an arrow, probably had an awesome mustache. So these guys are excited about their little adventure when the town doc has to go and almost ruin everything. Doc was obviously the smartest guy in town. And if you can picture a doc from any western show or movie you'd ever seen, or who seems to know everything, it's this guy. Anyway, he's telling them they need to be careful because that thing came from space and could have some kind of harmful effects on humans, like toxic space fumes or spores or something. He also mentioned it was doubtful that they would find the actual crash site. It might have looked like it landed on the mountain, but it couldn't be much higher and inaccessible. The group doesn't pay any attention, and Smokey says they'll bring Doc back a piece of the shrapnel. So the next day, they gather their crap and head out. They're all armed, of course. They're cowboys, after all. Besides, this was Indian country. Anyway, it only takes about half the day to get to the mountain base where the trail starts. They might have actually been there sooner, but they didn't ride hard. They enjoyed the open prairie, BSing with each other. They weren't too cautious either, not a single sign of any Indians. So they reach the mountain base and start heading up the trails. They could still ride their horses about halfway up the mountain before they had to go on foot. These trails have been walked before, so there was a makeshift horse rail at the trailhead that someone made at some point in time where it got too treacherous for horses. The trail got steep, but this particular area was pretty heavily wooded as well, so even if the trail wasn't as steep as it was, there was no way the horses could make it through the woods. Since they didn't want to leave their horses alone for too long, they decided to camp here for the night. They set up a campfire and did the usual bullcrap people did. Told some stories, ate food, then hit the sack. They woke up early the next morning and set out on the hard part of the trail. It was hard work getting up this trail, but boy was it worth it to reach this lake they were headed to. Anyway, as they got closer and closer, Smokey, I think it was him, apparently looked up at one point and noticed the trees were getting shorter and the sun seemed to be getting brighter. "You guys, look up! Look at those trees! The gall-dang tops have been sheared off!" This gets the guys all excited as they stop and look up to take it in. Jack especially is all giddy about how close they must be getting. Angley is the furthest and apparently calls out, "Whoever gets there first, find a good rock to take back to the dock. That son of a bitch," jokingly. Now the peak where they were headed was kind of an oasis. There was a medium to large-sized lake completely surrounded by the mountains and trees. There was only one trail that led to this lake into the mountains. There'd probably be some kind of resort there nowadays if it was still accessible. Anyway, the meteor had indeed crashed exactly where they thought, right into the middle of this resort-like lake. Each one of the guys stopped dead in their tracks upon entering the clearing and seeing the destruction. They all mumble some kind of surprised expression. "Jesus H. Christ, driving a horse-drawn buggy," Smokey murmurs. "I guess we won't be coming up here anymore," the sheriff says. There was rubble littering the area from the impact. I mean, this place was trashed, completely destroyed, and the lake itself was finished, as one of the guys apparently stated. There's pieces of rock everywhere. There's trees destroyed and tipped over. There's broken trees still smoking from the small fires that put themselves out. But what was the most interesting is what was in the lake itself. From what they recount, there was this large piece of metal sticking out of the lake, with a couple of smaller pieces near the top sticking out of either side. A couple of guys started moving closer to the lake, and the sheriff got all mad and safety-oriented. "Everyone be careful now, goddammit," the sheriff said. "Watch out for sharp rocks. Don't pick up anything misshaped too much. Rocks can be sharp as knives." They moved up to the shoreline and everyone noticed a large thing sticking out of the water. Someone, Billy will say, asked what it could be. They don't know it's metallic at this point. Angley was a blacksmith, so he mentioned, "It looks like some kind of metal." He picked up a nearby stone and threw at it. It hit the object with a ping. "It's definitely metallic." Jack is leaning over, trying to look into the water. He blurts out, "Holy shit, guys! I can see something further down in the water it's connected to." They all peer into the lake where he pointed, and sure enough, the metal shaft was connected to an even larger object deeper down. It was too deep though, and the water was murky from all the dirt and rubble the crash had caused. All they could make out was a silhouette. Billy is way too curious about this. He's like, "Let's swim down there. I bet we can get a better look before we come up for air." There's a couple murmurs of agreement, and a couple of the guys start loosening some of their clothes like they're going to dive in. The sheriff gets all pissed off again. It's a good thing he was there, though. "Wait! Just a goddamn minute." He pauses and surveys the water. "Nobody get in the water. Look at all these fish that are belly up." Nobody had noticed with all the excitement of the destruction of the mysterious metal shaft. There's dead fish floating in the water, a lot of them, mostly concentrated near the shaft. Jack is surprised. "What the hell?" While everybody is focused on the fish, he notices the water is messed up too. "Look at the water. It's like something's in it." They all look a little closer, and sure enough, the water looked weird. There was like a discoloration to it. In all the excitement, they hadn't noticed it even though they were just looking in the water trying to see what was down there. Now with the advent of technology, the description of the water has changed a little bit. I think the easiest way for me to describe how it looked is if you think about water and oil mixing. You kind of get like a rainbow hue, only this wasn't as strong. They're all kind of farting around on the shore when Billy sees a turtle in the sand a few feet away crawling around near the waterline. "Look at that turtle. It's alive." He bent down to pick it up. It was a smaller turtle, about the size of a softball. "Don't touch it," the sheriff says gruffly. It's too late. Billy picks it up and finds it with a coating of whatever was in the water. Smokey gets all pissed off this time. "God damn it, look! Look, you got that shit all over your hands." Billy was holding the turtle in his left hand, while he uses his right to make fists and run his fingers over the thin substance. Apparently it had a silvery hue to it out of the water. He describes the feeling to the other guys, saying, "It feels slippery. It doesn't burn or hurt at all." Angley doesn't like this either. He yells at Billy to, "Don't touch your goddamn mouth. In fact, just put the damn turtle down and wipe your hands." Doc says don't touch your eyes or mouth if you get shit on your hands until you wash it off. Anybody got any blasted soap? Smokey says he does, but didn't have time to get it out of his bag. Billy yells out suddenly, probably scaring the ever-loving shit out of everybody. "Ow, son of a bitch, turtle just bit me!" The turtle had bitten the part of his hand between his thumb and his index finger. The soft webbing, some people call it. Concerned and annoyed, Angley says, "I don't know why you'd pick it up here. There's snappers in these parts, you know." Smokey disagrees. "That ain't no damn snapper. Way too small." By this time, Billy had thrown the turtle down in the sand. "Shit, it drew blood," he says, showing his hand to everybody. Now, personally, I was always skeptical of the turtle bite part, since turtles don't have teeth. But apparently, if a normal river turtle bites hard enough, its beak could be capable of drawing blood. They all looking at hand, and Jack mentions what a pissed off little turtle it must have been. The sheriff was the only one looking at the turtle laying in the sand. "That turtle looks like shit," he says gruffly. "Look at him." Everyone gathers around where the turtle is. It was on its back, writhing around in the sand for a few seconds before it corrected itself. It did not look like a normal turtle anymore. Apparently the look of the turtle had changed over the years depending on who's telling the story, but either way, I guess its normal green and brown hues were gone. It was like a grayish color almost, an ugly looking gray. Smokey makes a conjecture about the way the turtle looks. "It looks like it's dead." Billy gets all pissed off. "Well, it's obviously not." He holds up his hand again. He wasn't bleeding bad, so to speak, but there was enough to see that the turtle got him good. Angley gets all bent out of shape about cleaning the wound again, saying, "We got to get the shit washed off quick. Get water from a canteen and get the soap over here." They patched Billy up and spent the next couple hours looking around. They gathered some rocks, looked at and climbed, destroyed trees, and tried to get a look at whatever was in the water from every possible angle without getting too close. More turtles were popping up on the beach and the guys were kicking them back in. Also, a few waterfowls or birds of some kind had flown over the area and made their way towards the water, but none of them landed. I guess they stopped dead in their tracks a couple feet above the water, flapping their wings and hovering in place, then flew off. Like they somehow knew or sensed the water was bad news. Somebody makes a comment about it, and Smokey chides Billy by saying the birds were smarter than he was since they knew the water was garbage. They decide it's time to go, so they stand around discussing their plan of action. They decided to try and get home that day and get Billy to the dock. They'll be going downhill this time, and they'll ride a lot harder home than they did on the way in. The sheriff isn't sure though. Clouds rolling in. Don't look like rain, but there won't be any moon. We're not gonna make it home. Let's get back to the horses and camp here. They gather their stuff and start down. They actually did make pretty good time at first, but then Billy started to lag. Eventually, he stops and bends over to catch his breath. Smokey asks if he's okay. Billy shakes his head saying, "I don't know. I forgot where I was going for a second there. Now I can't catch my breath." Yeah, you can probably guess where this is headed. Anyway, on account of Billy's newfound lethargy, they didn't make great time back to the horses. It took about double the time what it should have taken to get down the hill. So they get back to the horses and Angley says Billy looks like hell. That bastard turtle. It had to have been some kind of disease and now Billy's infected. He still thinks they should make a run for home that night. "We're not going to make it down this wooded hills in the dark," the sheriff reiterates. "And if we did, we needed to cross the plains home. We'd never see an Indian attack coming if they were out there." Jack and Smokey both agreed. So they set up camp again and make a fire. The night comes and sure enough, it's pitch black without the moon. They're all kind of hanging out, sitting around the fire, and Billy just keeps putting on more clothes. It wasn't especially cold out that night, but even then, Billy was sweating up a storm. I mean, he was apparently pure sweat on his face, like someone had dumped a bucket of water on him. "He ain't gonna last the goddamn night," Angley said, pointing a stick with a hot dog, or sausage, or whatever they had back then. On it, Billy. "I'm telling you, we should have tried to get him home." There was a mumbling and murmurs from the rest of the guys on what they should have done. At this point, Billy kind of stands up, steps away from the fire, then lays himself on the ground. Apparently it looked like he just fell, but he had laid his blanket out on the ground like he was going to bed, so nobody really knew what to think. "Night," Smokey says without turning away from the fire. The guys stay by the fire, but only after a few minutes Billy starts moving on the ground. He rolls back and forth for a few seconds, then full on starts convulsing. "Jesus H!" Smokey yells, throwing his sausage down. The rest of the guys all huddled around Billy. None of them even knew what a seizure was, so they didn't know what to do. "Help him, Christ's sake!" Jack yells. "Hold him down!" the sheriff hollers. "He's gonna hit his head!" FYI, never tried to hold down or prevent movement from someone seizing, but like I said, they didn't know what was going on. After what seemed like an hour, it was really only a couple minutes, Billy stops seizing, lets out this raspy groan, which probably let all the air out of his lungs, then stops moving. "Billy!" Angley slaps his face. "Jesus H!" Smokey says. "He's stone cold." He was holding Billy's non-bitten hand. After a minute or two of trying to wake Billy up, the sheriff speaks up. "He's dead." Nobody can believe it. "He didn't look good," Jack stammers. "He looks like that damn turtle," Angley says gravely. I guess Billy was looking pale. Not so much gray, I guess. But over the years of telling this tale and each generation making their own conjectures, I like to say that Billy looked like the life had left him before he even died. But you're not supposed to look that color as soon as you die is the thing. It takes time for life to fade out of someone's body after they die. The sheriff lets out a long sigh. "All right, listen up. He was fine this morning, that turtle bit him, and now he's dead. Nobody touched the body. If you did, wash your hands right damn now. Wrap him up in the blanket and slide him away from where he'll be sleeping. We need to get his body to doc for an autopsy." They cleaned up for dinner before messing with Billy's body. They found a nice spot under a tree away from the camp to stash the body. Smokey and the sheriff were the ones to move him. They each grab a tufted blanket, parts which hadn't touched Billy, and slide him over to the tree. "Poor son of a bitch," Smokey says as they stood over him. They turned around but didn't walk away yet. "Any next of kin you know of?" the sheriff asks. Before Smokey could answer, there was a growl behind them. I guess it was a guttural, savage-like feral even. Then another one. I guess Smokey and the sheriff stopped talking as soon as they heard the growl and kind of stood there looking at each other without saying anything for a couple seconds. After the second growl, they slowly continued turning around to find Billy sitting up. They're kind of just standing there looking baffled, not sure what to think for a second before Billy snarls or growls and then lunges forward. He moves fast. He's on his feet in a second. "What the?" That's all Smokey can get out before the sheriff lets out a pissed-off, painful howl. "Ah!" is all the sheriff could muster. Probably trying to say fuck, is my guess. Billy's got the sheriff's left hand in his mouth. He's got it by the fatty part of the outside of his hand, below the pinky. Sheriff had gotten his hand up, otherwise Billy might have gotten his neck straight away. "Jesus H. Christ, you guys fuck!" Smokey is yelling as he tries to get Billy off the sheriff by hitting his head with a hand. Jack and Emily come rushing over. "Holy Christ!" Emily shouts. Him and Jack also start hitting Billy. "He ain't dead!" Jack is yelling. Billy lets go of the sheriff at this point, and Sheriff staggers away from the area holding his hand. The other three guys are standing there looking at Billy in shock. His chin and lower jaw are soaked and dripping in red blood. His skin has absolutely no color whatsoever, and the look in his eyes is so wild it's like the 1,000-yard stare from the devil himself. Billy rushes to the other side of the three guys at this point with a raspy growl, and they scatter in different directions. "Don't let him bite you!" Smokey yells. It almost sounds kind of funny. Billy is running after anything that moves, and Smokey, Jack, and Angley are running all over the camp to avoid him. Each guy lets out a screech whenever they see Billy is locked onto them. The horses don't like it either. Amid all the commotion, they're rearing up and bucking, and lucky for them, by the time Billy notices them and starts going after them, they broke off the horse rail and are on their way down the hill. The guys gather by the fire to catch their breath when Billy turns around and starts running back at them. There's a sudden boom that most likely caused all three men to crap their pants. Billy stops. Boom, 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 boom. The last one puts Billy on his back. Sheriff comes walking out of the shadows with his gun drawn in front of him. Sheriff reloads as the other guys got their own guns out of their sleeping bags. "He's dead?" Jack asks. Of course he's dead, Emily returns. Yeah, well, we thought that before, Jack reiterates. Just as everyone calms down, Billy starts to move again. That's impossible, Smokey said as Billy stands up. Hit him again, Sheriff hollers. They all blast him and Billy goes down again. Sheriff doesn't empty it this time, though. He walks over to Billy and just stands over him for a few seconds. Sure enough, Billy sits up again and Sheriff blows his head off. Everybody is quiet for what feels like a year. That did it, Smokey says finally. They all gather around Billy's body. Doc isn't gonna believe this, Jack says. He'll have to, Sheriff says. 4 men telling him the same story. Once he gets a look at the body, there shouldn't be any doubt. If anything, the autopsy will show how something made Billy sick. Smokey is looking grim once he realizes something. He starts. I'm not saying we need to shoot anybody, but... I already thought of that, Sheriff says. He was standing over the fire now, running his hand over it and wincing every few seconds. He was cauterizing his bite. That's pretty hardcore. I'm bit. That sick turtle bit Billy and he turned into some kind of demon. Now Billy bit me. What do we do? Angley asks. The weather hasn't changed. Still way too dark to risk all our lives trying to get me to the dock tonight, Sheriff says. So here's what we're gonna do. He bends down and picks up some rope out of his gear. Smokey, you tie some pretty mean knots. Tie me to that tree there, and if I end up like Billy, my growling and rasping should wake you up, and I won't be able to bite anybody. I don't think I'll be able to sleep, Smokey says. You have to get some, Sheriff says. First light, we have to be gone. So the guys bag Billy up again in his sleeping bag and pull him away from the camp. Angley lets out a long sigh. We're gonna have to drag his ass all the way back home. That's why we have to leave as soon as the sun starts rising, Sheriff says as he sits down next to his tree. It was a smaller tree, small enough to wrap the rope around Sheriff's torso and around the tree a couple times and knot it off. Smokey asks if it's too tight. Sheriff says it's just tight enough. If things go to shit, Sheriff doesn't want himself to be able to wiggle free. Everybody says their good nights and try to fall asleep. It's hard to say if anyone actually got much sleep, but Smokey is up first. He jolts awake nervously and finds the sun is up on its way up. The clouds have cleared out, so he wakes everybody else. They all kind of panic as they look over at the sheriff. He's sitting there, still tied up, with his head slumped down on his chest. He dead? Jack asks. Sheriff raises his head and looks at the guys. I ain't dead. How do you feel? Smokey asks. My hand hurts like hell, Sheriff returns. It's been hours, Angley says. By this time, Billy was looking like hell. You still have color. Maybe it didn't transfer from Billy, Jack offers. Sheriff tells them they don't have time for them to figure it out now. That's the doc's job. So they gather their crap up and head down the trail, dragging Billy behind them tied up in his sleeping bag. They have a stroke of luck here, something they sorely need. Dragging Billy downhill made it easier, but when they got down the trail, they found Sheriff's horse was just hanging out a couple 100 feet out in the prairie, drinking from a small ditch. He whistles and it comes running and they strap Billy over him. They head for home as fast as they can and get there in late afternoon. Alrighty, so I'm rambling on here. I'm going to cut it here and resume this part 2 in a couple days or sooner, if y'all are interested. There was a zombie outbreak out west in the late 1800s. I'm here to tell you all about it. Part 2. Alright, so the guys make it home that afternoon. They enter the town down the main street and there's a couple people here and there. Some shop owners standing out front in their place enjoying the weather, etc. The general store owner comes out, running up to them, and he's like, "Where the hell's Billy?" "He's dead," Sheriff returns quickly. "We gotta get to Doc right now." By now, more people are popping out of wherever they were hiding. They get up to the Doc's place and the train of people and tail, all wondering what the hell is going on, not getting answers. Was it Indians? Was it an animal? Did he shoot himself on accident? Doc hears the commotion and comes outside as they approach. He's looking at the house, knowing full well there's a dead body in the sleeping bag, then sees Sheriff's bandaged up, bloody red hand. Inside. Doc starts on one of them as they put the sleeping bag on the exam table. "I told you it was a bad idea to go up there. What happened?" He starts undoing the sleeping bag. Sheriff stops him. "Hold on. Before you look, you need to hear what happened first. So they tell him the whole thing. Of course, he doesn't believe them. Now, I told you there could be toxins up there. Some kind of space dust you inhaled that made you hallucinate. I sure hope I don't have to call the state marshals to start a murder investigation. Well, don't take our word for it, goddammit, Smokey says. Here you go. He whips open the sleeping bag Doc had untied. Doc jolted and jumped back. After a few seconds of staring, he starts getting closer. He looks like Swiss cheese, doesn't he? English says dryly. He bit the hell out of my hand. Damn near might have torn out my jugular if I hadn't got it up in time. I made a judgment call forwarded to me as a lawman. He tried biting everyone else, so I put him down. Then he got back up. People don't just get back up after being shot, Doc says, not taking his eyes off Billy's corpse. Well, he did, Jack says. And no, we didn't have any alcohol up there. Nobody even brought any. Headshot stopped him for good, Sheriff says, pointing to a huge hole in Billy's head. Doc kind of snaps out of his trance. Okay, so a turtle bit him, and by night he was... this? Yes, Sheriff says. There was something in the water. Turtle was covered in it. I'm gonna need that turtle to find out if I was carrying some kind of infection, Doc says. Doc and Sheriff start playing the who has more authority card. Nobody is going up there, Sheriff says. Too dangerous. Whatever that turtle have, it's safe to say Billy did too. Doc is staring at Billy again. It's like he's been dead for weeks. This happened overnight. Sheriff is bit too, Doc, Smokey says. He kind of says it with dread in his voice. Doc checks his hand out. That's quite a bite. Nice work cauterizing it. I've got some antibiotics to start you on. Not sure if they'll help, though. The rest of the guys murmur quietly. Thought it looked worse yesterday, Smokey ponders. Why doesn't he look sick? Jack asks. Doc goes into a long spiel. There could be several reasons. I said the antibiotic may not help because it sounds like whatever was transferred to Billy is probably viral. A couple things can happen when it comes to any disease, bacteria or viral. 99% of people who get infected get sick and show signs, and be contagious and fall prey to whatever the disease causes, up to death depending on what it is. The other 1% could be three different things. First, you could straight up be immune to the disease. For whatever reason, it's not able to overcome your immune system. You won't show signs, you won't be sick, and you won't be contagious. I hope he's immune, Engley interrupts. Doc doesn't miss a beat. The second thing is you could be a carrier. That means you're infected, but you won't feel sick and you won't show symptoms. You are still contagious, however. How do we know if he's immune or carrying? Smokey asks. I'll have to do some blood tests. I'll probably have to run cultures, which takes time. What's the third thing that can happen? Sheriff asks. Well, we don't have to worry about that since you've already been showing. But the last thing that can happen is the pathogen completely mutates your DNA. When it enters your body, within hours your body could start changing physically. Muscle tissue overgrowth, skeletal growth, or shrinkage. Severe decrease or increase in mental function. The list of physical changes could be endless. So until we know, I need to act like I'm a carrier, Sheriff says. That's correct, Doc returns. Don't use the public outhouse. Only prepare your own food. Keep that hand wrapped tight. Sheriff says he's just going to go home and stay there and run his office off his front porch. So they all leave the Doc's place as he gets ready to do the autopsy on Billy. Doc only has one nurse with him, but she was more than an assistant than an actual nurse. They glove up and get their table ready. It's at this point that the shit really starts, and honestly, it was a complete freak accident. At this point, Doc interrupts the nurse to remove Billy's teeth for dental records, while he examines what's left of Billy's brain. Doc has a suspicion that whatever made Billy sick specifically affected his brain, given he apparently went insane and tried to attack everybody. Doc was also interested in the brain because that was eventually stopped Billy for good when he was shot there. Okay, Doc starts, so his brain appears to be covered in a foreign substance of some kind. Most of the blood is coagulated and dried, but this appears to still be moist. I can verify it as a silvery in hue. He's telling the nurse so she will be able to help him write his notes. Now this next part is what screws everybody up. Doc is poking around the brain, and he must have hit a nerve of some kind. Whatever he hits causes Billy's jaw to close hard and quick. Remember what the nurse is doing? She's trying to pry his teeth out. Despite being dead, Billy manages to bite the nurse's finger hard. She lets out a cry and Doc gets worried. "It didn't break the skin, did it?" he asks hurriedly. They both make a huge mistake here. The nurse lies and says it didn't break the skin. It did. Doc also doesn't ask to look at it. He can't seem to pry himself away from Billy's carcass. The nurse says she's just going to wash her hand real quick to be safe, and Doc lets her. She comes back with a band-aid on her finger, but since the gloves they were wearing were opaque, Doc doesn't notice. Doc moves on to the torso and cuts Billy open. There's silvery shit everywhere. It was definitely in his bloodstream. I think I might be able to isolate a sample. They wrap up what they're doing after a couple hours and the nurse goes home while the doc writes his notes. It's dusk by now, so everyone will start hitting the sack before long. Doc is up all night though. More on that later. That was also the last night in that town's existence. Angley, Jack, and Smokey had gone out looking for their horses after leaving Doc's, but didn't have any luck. They decided to shack up in a small hut a couple miles outside of town. It was getting late and the person who had owned the house had died a couple months prior. Anyway, they wake up early before the sun is even up and decide the horses are long gone, so they should just head back to town. The sun is starting to come up when they reach town, and they can see before they even get there, a lot of people are already up and walking around town. Smokey thinks this is strange, saying, "I thought we got up early. Seems like the whole town is up already and at 'em." They get to the town and the sun is up, but it was just dark enough they didn't notice what was going on. Jack sees a guy he recognizes and called out, "Hey, Mac!" Mac stops, and turns around, and the three guys all stop dead in their tracks. Half of Mac's face is gone, and that left is half muscle tissue and half of it straight down to the bone. The rest of his body isn't much better. He starts shambling towards the guy. Not a full-scale sprint, but not exactly slow either. "Holy shit, it's Brad!" Smokey calls out. Nobody else has time to call out. Smokey and Angley retreat while Jack stands his ground and shoots Mac. "His head!" Angley yells. Mac goes down with a boom. Everyone else in the street turns their attention to the guys and starts shambling towards them. Some are missing all assortments of limbs, from fingers to hands to arms. Most are missing large chunks of flesh. Apparently, one in particular had no flesh left at all on their head, and it was just a skeleton head on a decayed body. "The whole fucking town!" Smokey yells. They all shoot off a couple rounds before realizing the town is gone. Now, they don't know anything about what happened during the autopsy. But remember the nurse? Yeah, she went off somewhere and died during the night. The bad news was she was living in the town inn for the time being since a lantern had tipped over and started a small fire where she lived. Anyway, nobody knew who she bit first, but you know how it goes. She ate someone, then they came back and ate someone else. Whole town was probably gone within an hour. "Run!" Angley yells. They scatter as the horde approaches. Smokey and Angley duck into the saloon while Jack disappears somewhere else. "What do we do?" Angley shrieks. "I don't know!" "Don't make any noise. Shut the hell up!" Smokey whispers loudly. It was too late. A couple zombies were already heading towards the saloon. "Upstairs!" Smokey yells. They hear a couple of gunshots outside, probably from Jack. They start upstairs and almost get there when the door to the room at the top of the stairs flies open and a zombie snarls and tackles Angley, who was going first. Angley and the zombie fall back, while Smokey reacts and backs up against the banister. They tumble down the bottom of the stairs. It's a grisly sight. The zombie starts eating Angley right away. He hits it a couple times and tries to get a shot off, but by the time a bunch more zombies have burst the saloon swinging double door, and they start it too. Smokey gets upstairs and realizes he's cornered, so he steps over the railing and jumps down to the bar. He quickly jumps down behind it. What has been described as Angley getting eaten sounds pretty awful. Smokey sees a zombie a couple feet away with an arm, and another one has his leg nearby. The screams before being cut off in a gurgling grunt sound like something you simply can't unhear. So Smokey is hiding behind the bar wondering what the hell he is going to do. It sounds like the zombies have picked Angley clean, though they seem to be just shambling around. It's likely they forgot he was there. Smokey morbidly thinks to himself, Angley isn't going to look good when he rises back up. Smokey hid for what seemed like an eternity when he heard loud footsteps coming from the doorway. It was definitely hooves. He pops up and sees the sheriff riding his whole damn horse in the saloon. A bunch of zombies behind him. He's got a shotgun on him, and he blasts the 2 zombies nearest to him. They were close enough together that he got both of them. Their heads basically exploding. He gets a second shot he blasts off and throws the whole gun at the nearest zombie. It was a double barrel, so it only had 2 shots. Anyway, this catches everyone else's attention, but he already had his pistol out. He gets maybe 3 more before the horde behind him catches up. His horse freaks out and bucks him off, so the sheriff crawls on the floor under some tables away from the zombies. It's kind of sad. He's able to escape because they get his horse. Out back! Sheriff yells at Smokey. They scurry out the back. What happened? Smokey yells. I don't know. I came into town to see the doc and found everyone was like Billy. Doc's got his place locked up tight. Curtains drawn and everything. We need to find Jack, Smokey says. He's on his own, Sheriff says. We need help and we need it now. Huh? Smokey says. Sheriff quickly explains the help he wants to get is from the friendly Indians nearby, a couple miles southwest. Which tribe it was has changed over the years and it doesn't really matter. Smokey agrees they need the help, so they sneak down to the south end of town. Sheriff leads them to the doc's place, where he has Angley's horse tied up with the horse rail. There's a bag laying on the ground with a rope tied around it connected to the saddle. The bag clearly has a body in it. I found Angley's horse screwing around on my property this morning. I brought it in and tied Jones up to him after I had to kill him. I want to show these Indians exactly what we're up against, Jeff explains. They mount up and ride away as a bunch of zombies are headed towards them. Once they're in the clear, Smokey asks, You really think they'll help us? I've actually talked to them quite a few times, Sheriff says. They're a spiritual people. They have rich folklore. The way they talk about their ancestry. I bet they had a story of some kind dealing with the dead. If anything, I'm sure they have some words they can spare to help us kill these damn things. Smokey doesn't argue. They ride out a couple miles until they come across a scouting party. The village is a short ways past them. It seems like one of the Indians recognized the sheriff. He waves at him, and the Indian motions with his hand for his buddies and starts riding out to meet them. The sheriff talks to his friend, who has come to know as Buffalo Horse, about what is going on. He doesn't show Buffalo Horse what's in the bag, but he agrees to take them to the chief. Now, we call him Buffalo Horse because his name was something Indian sounding, like rides with buffalo or runs with bison or something. But apparently, Smokey called him Buffalo Horse on accident at some point because he forgot his name. Plus, Buffalo Horse is a lot easier to write than rides with buffalo, so there you go. Anyway, they get to the chief's teepee and Sheriff and Smokey wait outside a minute and untie Jones from the horse. Buffalo Horse comes out and says the chief will see them. They go inside, dragging Jones behind them, and see the chief and what must be his council all sitting on the ground. The chief says something in their native language. Why have you come and what do you bring with you? The person sitting next to the chief translate. We got ourselves a little pickle, Sheriff begins. The guy translate. The dead have come back to life. We need your help stopping it. The translator looks surprised, but, almost reluctantly, translates. The chief appears to ponder this statement while giving Sheriff a steely gaze. Look here, Sheriff says, unveiling Jones. Jones raises his head and snarls. He wasn't actually dead. The council and everyone else in the teepee jump to their feet and let out murmurs of shock and surprise. One member of the council yells loudly something in their language, then rushes over and buries his tomahawk into Jones's head. I thought you said he was dead, Smokey whispered to Sheriff. I lied, Sheriff whispers back. We got a town full of these, Sheriff says. The council all deliberate. It seems like they might be telling the chief to tell Sheriff and Smokey to go fuck themselves. The chief speaks and the translator translate. You will take Buffalo Horse and Fish River with you. They will help you kill them and make sure none are left. Of course, his name isn't Fish River. He was the top fisherman in the tribe, so his name was related to that. I want to say it was swims with fish or runs with the river, but either way, I don't know for sure, and once again, Fish River is a lot easier to ride out. Hope nobody's offended by these nicknames. So Buffalo Horse and Fish River leave to gather their weapons. The chief says something to Sheriff and Smokey in English as they are leaving the tent. Beware the bite of the dead man. Thank you, Sheriff says. Not just for this tidbit of information, but for their help as a whole. Beware the bite was the first damn thing we learned, Smokey says once they're outside. Yeah, I told you they have some kind of knowledge about this. You see that one Guy went straight for his head. Buffalo Horse and Fish River are right over. All right, man, Sheriff says. Looks like we've got a town to clean up. The Indians led Smokey a spare horse, and the four of them ride back towards town. They get about a mile from town when they notice some stragglers. There's a couple of townsfolk who have scrambled out of town and are just lost wandering the open land. Buffalo Horse and Fish River take the opportunity to show what they can do. Buffalo Horse uses his bow and pulls off a miraculous headshot from about 50 yards out. Fish River rides up to his guy and smokes him in the head with some kind of club, the force of which knocks the whole rotting head off the shoulders. Anyway, they make a startling discovery at this point. A little past these two stragglers, they find a cow just standing in the middle of nowhere, its entire side missing flesh, with its rib cage and half of its guts in the ground next to it. After putting it down, they realize they're going to have to sweep the entire countryside all around town, thus not the zombies wandering off, but any animals they happen to eat along the way. They decide to split up and do a wide circle around town to clean up anything they find. Before moving into town proper, a lot of people's houses as they decide to clear first. Most of them were single story and only a room or two. Smokey and Fish River, and Sheriff and Buffalo Horse. They start at the south and ride their way to the north side of the town. They find a couple of stragglers they put down, and Sheriff ends up finding his horse as well, half limping after some kind of desert rodent to eat it. It was probably nice for Sheriff to be able to put him down for good, in a morbid kind of way. Alright guys, it looks like we're going to need a part 3. There was a zombie outbreak out west in the late 1800s. I'm here to tell you all about it. Part 3. So we left off with the guys checking the outskirts of town and cleaning up a few stragglers, and now they're ready to head into town. They come in from the north side and are immediately met with about 6 or 7 zombies right off the bat. Buffalo and Fish, I've shortened their names even more at this time, are quiet about it, but Smokey up and just blows someone's head off, which obviously attracts everyone. They get off their horses and slap their ass and holler to get them to run off for the time being so they don't get eaten. They then duck into the inn since it's the nearest building. Smokey grabs the cavalry sword that's hanging off the wall as a decoration. Immediately inside the building, there's 2 zombies standing at the main desk, which Fish promptly slices up one of them while Smokey uses his new sword on the other. Might as well clear this building first, Sheriff says. Check every room. They head upstairs and find most of the rooms empty. The room at the end of the halls has 2 zombies trying to get in it. They're just walking to the door repeatedly and hitting it softly with their hands, and all the while growling and hissing. Hey, that the doc's nurse? Smokey points at one of them. Remember, they don't know she started it. Anyway, the zombie hears his voice and turns around and hisses and shambles towards them. Buffalo chucks his tomahawk and takes down the nurse, and Sheriff uses his bowie knife from the other one. Somebody out there? A small voice comes from inside the room. The guys all look at each other. Yeah, Sheriff returns. Hey, that Jack? Smokey asks excitedly. Yeah! They hear what sounds like Jack moving a bunch of stuff away from the door. The door opens a minute later to a relieved Jack. Felt like I've been in there for days. Hey, you brought some help? He says, referring to the Indians. There's no time to celebrate. The zombies who notice the guys go into the inn are now all shambling in through the entryway. Oh shit, Jack says. Everyone downstairs, Sheriff orders. They get back to the staircase, which has a large open section to the floor below with a banister, and it's like a cafeteria with all the groans, hisses, and snarls down below. Zombies that notice the guys start trying to climb the stairs. It's pretty gross. Flesh hanging on bones by a thread. Bones are completely showing. People clamoring around, dragging their entrails behind them. It's not a pretty picture. Light 'em up, Sheriff says. He opens fire. At this point, most of the zombies know they're here, so who cares about the noise? Plus, they've created a decent choke point for themselves. Buffalo and Fish are using their bows while Sheriff, Smokey, and Jack start shooting. Buffalo is closest to the staircase, and he takes 1 or 2 down with his knife and tomahawk that are able to climb the stairs. They wait a few moments after killing what seemed like the last one. Okay, looks like that wave is over. We'll head to the saloon and the general store next, Sheriff says. So they head downstairs, carefully stepping over the rotted corpses, and meet outside. Burn the building, Fish says. It'll destroy their corpses and the sickness they bring. All traces of this have to go, he says. He tosses a lantern in the inn, and its shatter is starting a fire. The nearby dead bodies go up almost immediately. We burn this town to the ground and any bodies along with it. We'll find a new place to live. We can head to Carson City and find something out that way. The general store was destroyed inside. The racks toppled over and bloodstains on the floor everywhere. But the only one in there was the shopkeeper. The saloon had about 3 or so zombies in it. They were left over from Smokey and Sheriff's daring escape earlier. They found a couple zombies outside, yet they had to drag in to be burned with the buildings. Looks like the docks place is about the only one left standing, Jack says. He's surveying what was once their town. A couple of the larger buildings are still ablaze, which some of the smaller ones have gone out already. They get to Doc's place and find the door locked and curtains still drawn. "Doc?" Smokey calls out. He finds a window with a curtain not pulled down and puts his face on the glass to try to look in. Can't see shit in there. Where the hell is he at? "Doc," Sheriff calls out loudly, banging hard on the door. "All right, break it down," he says after a pause. They force their way in. Doc's place is a 2-room building. The main area is where he sees patients. Then in the back there's a doorway to where his bedroom area is. They have a look around, and unless Doc is in the bedroom, he's nowhere to be found. "Holy shit," Jack says. He's standing next to Doc's exam table. Billy's body is still lying on it, completely sliced to hell. It's like he went at Billy like he was a ham. "Open him up damn near everywhere," Smokey says. "And look at these poor bastards," Jack says. He motions to a cage on a table with a few dead mice in it. "Those dead mice look like hell. I bet they were infected. How the hell would that happen if they're in the cage?" Smokey ponders. Sheriff tries the door to Doc's bedroom. It's locked, so he knocks on it lightly. "Doc?" "Look here," Buffalo says. "His writings." He holds up what appears to be Doc's journal. "Hey," Smokey says loudly. "Does he say if Sheriff's immune or whatever?" Sheriff takes the journal and begins leafing through. It's a small diary, so not a ton is written on each page. "No, he doesn't have much about me in here," Sheriff says. "Well, what in the hell has he been doing?" Jack asks. Sheriff is reading a page. He isolated some samples of that silvery shit in the water. Says here it was all over Billy's insides. So here I'm going to read what Doc supposedly wrote down as a journal entry, and we'll act like Sheriff is reading out loud. Probably the easiest way to incorporate the entries. Doc's journal entry. "Whatever this material is that has infected patient's body appears to be organic in nature. As near as I can tell with all my medical training, it's a bodily fluid of some kind, though where it originated I do not know. Looking at a sample under the microscope, it does not appear to be a pathogen at all, despite behaving like one. Transference from bites, etc. I have never seen or heard of anything like this before anywhere. I have to get up to that lake to see what the water and that object the men spoke about." "So we went up to the mountain?" Smokey asks, confused. "No," Sheriff says bluntly. He keeps reading. Doc's journal entry 2. "I injected one of my mice with the compound several hours ago. It died. Later, I left for supper, and when I came back, it was alive again, although now it was completely rabid and insane. I had attempted to euthanize it by injecting poison, and it had no effect, though I did not expect it to. Only after using a scalpel to pierce the head and brain did the subject cease. Whatever this foreign substance is, it seems to concentrate in the brain of whatever creature it affects." "There's more," Sheriff says. Next journal entry. "I tried something new since another experiment ended in failure. I poisoned another mouse and waited for death to set in. I then injected a dose of the substance an hour after it died. 10 minutes later the mouse started to move. Only this time when it woke up, it was not insane. It appeared to be perfectly normal. I euthanized it and did an autopsy. The substance had overrun the mouse's insides as before, but it had regenerated its blood flow and bodily activities. Its organs, heart, lungs, brain look fully functional. No signs of decay or atrophy that would have occurred after death. If I can unlock this substance, this could be the greatest medical discovery in history. A possible end to sickness or death. It's unimaginable. I must keep working. I do hope the sheriff is still alive. I may have squandered the perfect test subject." "So he's in here performing experiments?" Jack asked. "Does he know what the hell was going on out there?" Sheriff turns a page. He knew, he says. It says right here. He read another passage. Journal entry. The town is gone. I hear the screams. Must be my nurse. I should have had to see her finger. All I can do now is stay quiet and not attract any of their attention. I must unlock how this substance works. I attempted to repeat my successful experiment, and it did not work. Same result, an undead mouse. The regenerative property of the substance only seems to work on the brain when it fails, and only restores function at the most primitive of levels. Why did the sheriff in mouse number 4's body appear to accept this substance? So then, is he here? Smokey asks. Doc! Smokey yells loudly. We got a problem, Sheriff says. He sets the book down on the table. He injected himself. What? With that crap? Jack asks, flabbergasted. Smokey picks up the book and looks at it himself. His last passage, Sheriff begins. He goes on about how he has to figure it out, how he's going to inject himself, and how he has to feel it work. He also plans on injecting some medical things of his own in hopes it'll counteract failure. We need to find him, now, Buffalo says. All right, kick it down, Jack says, walking towards Doc's bedroom. They hear a crash in the room, and Jack stops dead in his tracks as a few feet from the door. There's a few loud thuds, followed by a deep, guttural growl, much louder and much deeper than anything they've heard before. What the bloody hell was that? Smokey asks. He's changed, Sheriff says. That sure doesn't sound like one of those others, Smokey starts. He doesn't finish his sentence. A gigantic creature smashes through the door, taking most of the wall with it. It has to be nearly 7 feet tall and bulkier than a semi-truck. It scoops up Jack like he weighs no more than a cotton ball and crumples him up like a piece of paper. The sounds of snapping bones go on for what seems like ever, and blood and guts are oozing out on the crumpled heap that was Jack as the creature throws it on the ground. Smokey and Sheriff get shots off, but its hide is so thick they are nothing but annoying mosquito bites. Now there's a couple of ways I can try to give you a mental picture of what this creature is supposed to look like. If you're familiar at all with the Left 4 Dead franchise, you know what the tank is. If you don't know what it is, then you at least know what the Incredible Hulk is. Like I said, it's at least 7 feet tall. Its arms are twice as long as a man's should be, and they're bigger than tree trunks, and its neck was nearly gone to the overgrowth of bone and muscle. Anyway, the creature rushes the center of the room and raises both arms to try and smash the guys. Sheriff, Buffalo, and Fish hightail it outside, but Smokey has to dive out of the way as the creature destroys the exam table and Billy's body. Each step the creature takes sounds like the thunder on the wood floor. Now, when the creature raises its arms up to smash, they went through the ceiling, which is probably what saved Smokey. The ceiling caves in and disorients the creature, giving Smokey time to rush behind it and get out the door. Jesus Christ! Smokey yells. What the hell is it? That's Doc, Sheriff says as they run back into the remains of town. It can't be, Smokey returns. Shit! We burnt everything on the ground. There's nowhere to hide. It's Doc, all right, Sheriff says. Remember what he said? It could mutate a person, make them grow bigger like that. Doc smashes his way out of his office, bringing down the rest of the building, and started making his way towards the guys. He doesn't have super speed or anything, but he is much faster than the zombies. Buffalo shoots an arrow at it and it bounces off. Any ideas? Smokey asks, seemingly prepared for their deaths. Yeah, actually, Sheriff says. We'll lead it to my house. Just need to stay ahead of it. They headed west out of town towards Sheriff's house. They keep a brisk pace ahead of Doc until Sheriff's house is in sight. Sheriff runs into his barn. The rest of the guys rush in behind him. What's the plan? Fish asks. Sheriff pulls a stick of dynamite out of a barrel in the barn. I'm gonna blow him sky high. I got 2 horses in the back there. You guys get them ready. So Smokey and the 2 Indians take the horses out the back, while Sheriff waits for Doc. Doc seems to pick up the pace a little while Sheriff lights the dynamite. He drops the stick on the ground and hightails out the back. He catches up with the guys behind a couple trees, and they cover their ears as the stick explodes, destroying the barn and hopefully Doc. They come out from behind the trees to investigate. They see one of Doc's now massive arms sticking out from under a large pile of rubble. They got him all right in the blast. They got him good. So everyone is standing there kind of relieved, and Doc's arms move. Ah, fuck, Smokey says. Doc starts ruffling even more as the rubble pile begins to move as well. Anybody got anything else in mind? The sheriff asks. Doc rises up out of the pile by now. Actually, I might have one, Smokey says. That blast gave me an idea. The old silver mine a couple miles north. Time to go, Fish says. Doc is back on his feet by this time and seems to be regaining his bearings. They saddle up 2 per horse and start riding north. We get to the mine. There's all kinds of TNT still in there, Smokey yells. We bring the mountain down on his ass. Great thinking, Sheriff hollers back, and they ride to the old mine, making sure Doc stays behind them. I'm not sure if the blast pisses Doc off or he used his new body now, but he's running full scale. If they hadn't been on horses, they'd have been overtaken. They pick up the pace as the old mine comes into view. I guess the question is, Smokey begins, how do we get him in there? Keep him in there long enough to blow the TNT, and all get out safely. We don't, Sheriff says coldly. Huh? We lead him in there. You guys get out the side tunnel. I stay and blow the mine, Sheriff explains. No time to argue. Listen, I've got it in me. The sickness. Remember what he said? It all has to go. But you could be immune, Smokey says. Doc never ran the test. We don't know if I'm immune or a carrier. If I'm a carrier, I can still transmit it, even on accident. As long as I'm alive, this thing still exists. Smokey tries to argue some more, but Sheriff won't have it. They all gather at the mine entrance as Doc comes barreling up. He picks up the pace when he sees them and lets out a deafening roar. Smokey and the Indians run ahead and get the TNT ready. They make a huge pile and place a couple bundles strategically around all the exits. They lead the fuses back to the center of the room, where Sheriff will be able to quickly light them all. You guys head out, Sheriff says. They can hear echoing roars coming from the tunnels. You guys need to make that mountain trail impassable. Whatever you can. Make it so people can never get up here again. They quickly say their tearful goodbyes and haul ass down the second tunnel. They're just about back outside when there is an earth-shaking, deafening explosion which knocks them to the ground. Smokey turns and sees the mine coming down on itself. Buffalo helps him to his feet and then gets further from the entrance and clears out the dust. They check the main entrances as well as the last side tunnel to make sure the mine is sealed off completely. Sheriff had brought thousands of tons of rock down on himself and Doc. There's no way Doc survived that one. The next day, and over the next few weeks, Smokey, Buffalo, and Fish did what Sheriff said. They made the mountain trail impassable. They enlisted the help of a couple more Indians to get it done. But they did everything from chop down trees to fall over the trail to cutting down cacti and throwing them on the trail to digging up the thorniest weeds and bushes they could find and replanting them on the trail. By the next summer, it had become so overgrown that they'd never known a trail had ever been there. Smokey also planted a large tombstone right at the head where the trail started, engraved with nothing but a skull and crossbones. And I guess that's the end of it. The small zombie outbreak was defeated and it appears they were successful. Almost 150 years later, and no sign of any zombies out there. Now you're probably wondering about the evidence I mentioned right off the bat about what's true about this story. There's a couple things that support this event actually happening. First, according to family research, we think Smokey is my great-great-grandfather. My granddad did in fact go by the name Smokey, but we weren't able to identify if he's actually the Smokey from the story. Second piece of evidence is the Doc's journal. Smokey kept it, and it was still around as long as 1976, where it was lost in a house fire. My dad claims to have read some of it when he was a kid back in the 50s, and there was some passages about undead. The thing is, if it hadn't been lost in the fire, it would pretty much be illegible today, as it was deteriorated badly by that point. Thirdly, I have seen the skull and crossbones tombstone with my own eyes. It's very worn and deteriorated, but it's still there. It's a solid 8-mile hike from the nearest campground, one way, and the trail isn't easy, but everyone in my family goes to see it at least once in their life. I walked into the woods a little bit beyond it, and there's simply no going anywhere up there. It's too thick. They're trashing the place, and 150 years of umbrella overgrowth sure did the trick. Probably good. For all we know, that lake is still infected, and those zombified turtles are still scuttling around in the sand up there. Hope y'all enjoy the tale. Quick epilogue. We think what crashed into the water wasn't a meteorite, but a spaceship, hence the metal shaft they saw sticking out of the water. And what the doc called bodily fluid that caused all this was secreted from the dead alien pilot who died on impact. Maybe their blood or other kind of secretion that helped them recover from injury. Food for thought.